So, all the vegans who judge people who go carnivore and invalidate their reactions, say they should ignore it for the well-being of animals, they should just be sick but not eat animals. If you have food allergies, you can have severe reactions and your life quality will be impacted. And you can also be allergic to plant foods, plant toxins. If your body doesn't have the capacity to properly detox, those toxins will accumulate in your body and cause issues, severe issues. And for some people to heal their body, the only possibility is to go carnivore. This is about health. I think the most important thing is just improving life quality. Diet can help, but then it's just a way to improve life quality, not cure autism. It is a way to take off many straws off the camel's back.
You can have people who avoid socializing because they have significant dietary disabilities and they just feel that nowhere can cater for them, or they feel limited and unlike other people because others can eat whatever they like. But if they have food allergies, food intolerances, and some people it's very extensive, like in my case, it's dairy-free, gluten-free, low salicylate, no sugar, no legumes, including soy and peanuts and whatever, and you end up really limited. But it's something that I have to do, to manage the health disorders. So some people don't have a choice. I want to talk a little bit about food intolerances and food allergies. So there is a lot of ignorance in society about these things. So some of the most common food intolerances are things like gluten intolerance, inability to break down the gluten protein, casein, which is your milk protein, particularly the cow's milk protein, which is one of the largest of the casein molecules, where, say, sheep milk is a much smaller casein molecule and easier to break down, blah, blah, blah. And so someone who doesn't live with this stuff, they go, oh, but why can you eat sheep yogurt and you can't have my whipped cow's cream, Well, you don't understand how that stuff works. Oh, it won't kill you. No, it won't kill you, but it might give you things like colic and gastro and headaches and brain fog and neuropsychiatric effects. And these will usually take about 3 days because that's how long it takes to get that substance out of your system, or at least to travel the digestive tract. In the case of another one of the food intolerances that's really common is salicylate intolerance. There's also amines and phenols and various stuff. Salicylate's a natural plant toxin. So our bodies are meant to detox from levels of this, and most people's bodies can do that well. And that's great. There's certain things that you might be missing that mean you don't detox as well as other people. For example, our immune system is part of what helps us with the detoxification process. Liver function is another one, kidney function is another one, But it might also be that you don't have enough of the enzyme that helps you to properly digest salicylates. So those things are going to build up in your system, and they can cause inflammatory states, chronic inflammatory states. So if you're used to having a lot of significant joint pain or gut inflammation or various inflammatory states, salicylates might really exaggerate that and leave you on anti-inflammatory medication unless you can manage to keep your salicylate levels low. But when you're in company with other people, they say, well, why are you able to have salicylates today, but you can't have them again tomorrow? Or why are you really strict on your salicylate levels now, but now you're able to have that thing that's got honey in it? Because it takes 7 to 10 days to get salicylates, to really lower the salicylates in your system. And it really messes with your head. So salicylate toxicity causes a cocaine-like effect. So when you start clearing this out of your system, sure, your inflammation levels come down, but emotionally and mentally, behaviourally, you're all over the place. That's if you don't get hives, allergy rashes, asthma, eczema from the salicylate levels. And some people do, some people don't. I do, but not consistently. So I'm a hives and an eczema girl and an asthma girl. But mostly with salicylates, I end up on the anti-inflammatories. So whatever issues I have related to having a collagen disorder just seem to get much more challenging, especially in terms of mobility and pain. So yeah, I choose not to have that level of pain and that level of disability issues, and that's my choice. It's my choice of what level of disability I choose to put up with, and I don't think it's someone else's position to judge that or take ownership of that. It's not their issue. It's not their choices. Yeah, and they haven't walked in those shoes. So yeah, back off. Then fructose intolerance is a very common intolerance. It's one that I don't have, lucky. But it affects diet really broadly. But those people who have fructose malabsorption, they might get ulcerative colitis from it. So they're bleeding from their butt. They might get lesser symptoms. So they might get, brain fog and colic and gastro, IBS type issues, headaches, migraines. So it's okay to pressure them to just, handle it for a day, handle it for a week, so that you can feel comfortable that they're normal? Really? So I think if a person with food intolerances has got used to their world and that stuff's normal in their world, and their partner and their closest friends chill out and never make a big point about it, they never take it and stick it in their face or flag wave it. They never say, oh my God, I'd just die if that was me. Oh, I can't think of anything more horrible. You're so unlucky. I don't know how you can live with that. That's really insulting. If someone said, I don't know how you can live with being that ugly. Oh, you're so unlucky to be that fat. I'd just die if I was that bald. I mean, really? You'd say that person's got some really serious issues and they really need to go and see a therapist and get that sorted out, because there's something seriously going on there. And it's actually not the problem of the person with the food allergies and food intolerances. You can't shut up and keep your judgments to yourself, your insecurity, your embarrassment, and your projections. Then go and mix with your own. Really had these issues, they'd be anaphylactic with projectile vomiting and severe eczema. You don't know jack shit. There's a whole lot of people who are in between there. And if you don't live in that world, if you're not the partner of that person who's been through that process with that person, seen what they're like when they've had those things, seen what the bloody toilet is like when they're sitting in there dealing with it, or what their mobility is like when they get up and try and get walking when they've had too much of something that their body can't properly digest or detox from. You don't have that right. You're not that close in their inner circle to really make those judgments and projections. Celiac, autoimmune disorder, where you're attacking your own gut lining, but not all people with celiac will be the same. Some people can handle food that has been cooked in the same oil as food that's got gluten. Other people are so severely celiac that they'll have an extreme reaction even with that low level of gluten contamination. So some of these people will be able to eat foods that say may contain traces, and other people can't at all. So it's a spectrum, and it's about time you started looking at it as a spectrum. Some people with celiac will be diagnosed by an IgA blood test for celiac, and other people might be IgA deficient, and I think it's 10 times the celiac rate for people with IgA deficiency, or 10 or 30 times, can't remember. But the point is they have a false negative to IgA blood tests to celiac. And if a neurologist then treats them for celiac neuropathy and says, you have celiac and you are coming off gluten, and then neuropathy gets resolved, who are you to say that they need to go back onto something that is frying their nerves and causing them sensory motor or autonomic neuropathy that is painful, that is impinging on their capacity to fully function, that is putting them onto various levels of pain medication, or just significantly limiting their potential and their capacity to forget about their body, because with neuropathy, you might have things like, your mouth is really burning, your lips are numb, your hands are numb, your feet are numb, you've got stabbing pains going on in your feet, you've got buzzing traveling up and down your legs are collapsing as you're falling, you're walking upstairs. You might have autonomic dysfunction, which is affecting your bladder and bowel and breathing and heart and blood pressure, temperature regulation departments. So who are you to say, oh, it's just a bit of neuropathy? It's not like you have real celiac. You're not. If you're not actually an expert in that field, maybe the most unfortunate thing that's going on is not that the person that you're with has got that issue, or even a range of those issues if they're unlucky enough to actually have a collection of them, and maybe you're really impaired in the ability to understand how to have a healthy friendship with somebody who has dietary disabilities without judging them, sticking it in their face, flag waving your attempts to meet their needs, hating them if they somehow can't accept the ways that you let's say you're giving them things that they're allergic to, and they can't accept it. Just get over it, because sometimes the hardest part about dietary disabilities is not the dietary disabilities, it's the people around you who just don't get it, who can't hack it, and deep down they're judging you for it.
No dogma. There's no room for dogma with this. This is about healing, and you can't. It just doesn't work that way. Thank goodness. Thank God we don't have to subscribe to a set of beliefs, a mental disorder, to think that way. So have had depression, anxiety. I've been on antidepressants since the age of 14, on and off. I was off antidepressants, didn't want to go back on, but I was feeling like that looming depression. And I came across Amber O'Hearn's story and some other people out in carnivore community that were saying that this way of eating had relieved not only their depression and anxiety, but autoimmune issues. I was thinking, wow, I'm very interested in finding something that can help me with this, depression, anxiety that I've really been fighting my whole life. as well as I'm very uncomfortable with these cysts. I had extra weight. I had stopped practicing yoga because my joints were in pain quite a bit. I would have swelling and inflammation, and I couldn't do yoga the way that I wanted to. So I just said, well, what do I have to lose? Maybe people are saying this is extreme and dangerous. Well, I've tried everything else and it hasn't worked for me, so why not just try this? So very quickly, that depression, anxiety went away very quickly. Very quickly, I dropped about 15 pounds. Very quickly, my joint pain was gone. That was all within the first few weeks. And I was only planning to do the diet for 30 days. And now here I am a year later, with the channel and the Instagram. And it's, I've just been really motivated to share my story because I think, other people out there may be having these same types of issues. This has been so helpful for me. Why don't I just share that with others?
The story there is one that, while it's a very individual story, it's also a story that most of us that have been around the nutrition and carnivore scene for a little while have heard so many times in a very similar sort of a way. Slight differences here and there in the exact presentation of some of these symptoms and things. But all of those things sound quite a lot like oxalate issues, yes. Probably from the veganism thing, I would imagine.
Oxalates is another issue, and for many autistics, it is really good to eat low oxalate. Bart Kay and Elliot Overton made a really good video on that.
It's not my research. It's really, I credit Susan Owens for this. But ultimately, I feel that if we can get it out to the public, if people can learn more about it, then hopefully things will become more clear. So what we're going to be talking about really is we're going to be going into the basics. First of all, people might have heard of oxalate. They might have heard that it can be problematic in their diet, but they don't necessarily know what it is. So I just want to cover the basics of what it is, where you find it, and then we're going to go into some of the details, and it might be a bit technical in some places, but we'll try to keep it simple and explain the topic. Okay, so to start off with, when we're talking about oxalate, oxalate is contained in many foods, but basically when you break down the chemical structure of oxalate, it's actually made up of oxalic acid. So oxalic acid is an organic acid. Okay, you find it in nature and it's ubiquitous throughout the plant kingdom. It's in lots of different plants, some more than others. Okay, it's generally very low in animal foods, and it's also produced by the human body. So your body does make oxalate. Okay, the problem is that in normal human metabolism, it's meant to be in very low amounts. Okay, so oxalic acid, you can think of it a bit like a magnet. Okay, it's a magnet in that it has a very high affinity for various minerals. Okay, so it comes along and it binds with those minerals very tightly. Okay, so there we've got the diagram of the magnet there. So oxalic acid, when you have oxalic acid, it binds with the mineral, and after it's bound, it forms something called an oxalate salt. And that's what we're referring to when we're talking about oxalate. Okay, so oxalate is generally not referring just to the oxalic acid, but it's actually referring to it being bound with a mineral. Okay, so it has affinities for various minerals. It can form what we call a soluble oxalate salt, which means that it can travel in the blood. Okay, it's water soluble, but it can also form an insoluble oxalate, and that's calcium, mainly calcium. When it binds with calcium, it basically forms like a crystal. Okay, and this can't travel through the blood. Okay, this can't be absorbed into the gut, and the reason I'm saying this, it's a point that really needs to be emphasized. When oxalic acid binds with calcium and it forms that insoluble salt, this is where it can really cause problems for the human body, and we're going to be looking at exactly how this can occur. Okay, so when we look at the structure of the oxalate crystal, after when you've got the oxalic acid, when it binds with calcium, it can basically form various different kinds of crystal structures. Okay, so you've got the image here, and it shows these are called raphides. Okay, so you have like spiky fork-like needles kind of thing. You also have various other shapes and sizes. You can have like rectangular or diamond-shaped crystals, and this is important because these are physical structures. So essentially, when this comes into contact with a tissue, it's a bit like a razor blade. You can imagine if you held a razor blade to your arm and you sliced it, it would cut through your arm. And it's very, very much a similar concept, whereby the physical properties of the oxalate crystals are actually severely damaging to physical tissue.
Things started coming right within a couple of weeks. You know, again, I'll mirror the same thing myself. That's what I found. I finally made the jump. Oh God, it's nearly 3 years ago now. We are human beings, and we live in a society that wants us to eat this shit, and this shit is designed to appeal to our dopamine systems.
Yes.
And, you know, so we do. You know, so I've transgressed from time to time, especially if there's been, you know, distress on or a problem or whatever. But I'm the same. Within 2 weeks, I mean, I'd had fibromyalgia, which had got to a point where I could sometimes not get out of bed. And within 2 weeks, that was basically in remission. I've had lifelong anxiety, bipolar, all of that stuff.
Wow.
That seems to be completely in remission. And although the veg tards would probably disagree with you because they have no basis for comparison anyway, actually my autism is much, much better. I'm much more human. I'm much more interactive. I'm much less autistic-y.
My daughter, I see it with her, you know.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I put her, from the moment I found out she had autism, I was on Google, you know, like, what can I do? Because they told us she had a severe regression when she was just after she turned 1, lost all of her language, lost her eye contact, lost every skill that she had. And so I was on Google immediately, like, what can I do? And so diet was the first thing that I was told, you know, gluten and dairy and all those things, soy. I put her on specific carbohydrate diet right away, and we just immediately changed her diet. As she's gotten older, any time that she gets off diet, gets off and gets into those things, we have severe behaviors, severe.
So, in particular with autism, if you have sensory issues, when you have to deal with sensory overload on a daily basis, then anything that can help to remove some straws off of the camel's back, you are ready to do it. It really has a huge impact on how you feel overall, because the sensory overload doesn't go away, you still have that. But if you feel good in your body in general, no digestive issues, no depression, less anxiety, no brain fog, no migraine. That's huge. If you can remove that or prevent it by avoiding certain foods, so people should just shut up and let you do it, because that's the way how you function best. if you tell people repeatedly that you can't eat something, and then they give you this exact food anyway, I mean, that just goes beyond my understanding. Well, what can you do? There is just still too much ignorance. As long as people don't have it themselves, they cannot relate, it seems. Or they don't care, I don't know. But I became carnivore for health reasons. I was struggling, and now I feel so much better. So that's my way to go, and I will continue with this way of eating as long as I feel as good as I am. And that's it. So with diet, you have a great tool to take straws off the camel's back. This is another option, camel milk, in case you can't tolerate any other form of dairy, not even sheep or goat milk. Try camel milk. It might surprise you. I've been drinking it for a few months now, and I feel my cognitive function has really improved, even though I was already carnivore. So give it a try. And fish oil, as long as you are not allergic to that, if you don't have any histamine issue, so you can try that. Particular with hormonal changes during the female cycle, I tend to feel more anxious and get antsy, and if I take more fish oil, then I get a hold on it, and the anxiety is practically non-existent, and that's just awesome. This is a fact. Diet has a huge impact, and you need to listen to your body.
So, according to a study published in the National Institute of Aging, they state that emerging findings suggest that dietary factors play major roles in determining whether a brain ages successfully or experiences a neurodegenerative disease. In other words, how our brain ages is almost entirely up to us. We're in control of that. So, of course, this is why we're all here. You know, the fact that 99.99% of all our genes were formed before the development of agriculture, right? We're basically all functionally, physiologically, genetically hunter-gatherers. And to me, that is an essential, foundational starting place. It is the only rational starting place. You know, whatever we would have had available to us as food throughout, you know, especially the most commonly available foods throughout our evolutionary history would have been the ones that shaped our physiological makeup, that shaped our nutritional requirements, that made us who we are. You know, we're also the only species that habitually chooses to consume foods to which we were not genetically adapted. I'm only saying. So, coincidence? I don't know, perhaps. So the question to answer is, what are we missing in this? Well, hello, we're supposed to be fat heads and not potato heads, or grain brains, right? Brain makes up maybe, 2 to 5% or so of your total body mass. And my running joke on this is maybe a little less if you happen to be a politician or a few other people, I won't name names. But it uses a whopping 20 to 30% of our total energy demands. That's massive. But get this, in babies, that percentage is more like 75%. And in older children, 45 to 50% of the energy demands are used up by the brain. And in contrast, to the great apes who maybe use about 8%. Their brains use maybe 8% of their total caloric energy demands. So we're a very, very different animal, a very different kind of primate. Irritability, brain fog, cognitive impairment, attentional disorders, depression, anxiety disorders, confusion and memory problems, alcoholism, nervous habits, mental disturbances, eating disorders, sleeping disturbances, emotional ability, and reactivity were suggested that the risk imported by higher serum glucose levels may be independent of ApoE4 status, which everybody wants to blame it on that. That's not the issue. This study raises additional questions about the role of the metabolic process in predisposition to Alzheimer's disease and supports the possibility of targeting these processes in pre-symptomatic Alzheimer's disease trials. And the authors actually further stated that clinically, even if your blood sugar levels are normal, lower blood sugar levels are better for your brain in the long run with regard to memory functions, as well as memory-relevant brain structures like the hippocampus. And this is the first part of your brain to start to deteriorate in conditions like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. It's the most vulnerable part of the human brain right there. It's also the part of our brain that mitigates stress response. Anybody need help with that? This other study in 2012 showed that disrupted insulin signaling induced brain changes characteristic of Alzheimer's, including disorientation, confusion, and an inability to learn and remember. And, it's not 100% all about what you're eating in terms of carbohydrates, in terms of sugar and starch, although it mostly is. But things like MSG, trans fats, gluten and other dietary antigens, cow's milk, which of course is very naturally high, it's mostly a carbohydrate food. It's not a protein food or a fat food, it's mainly a carbohydrate food. And then artificial sweeteners. All these things can play a role in creating a state of dysinsulinemia. These things all adversely affect. In fact, most medications also have adverse effects on insulin functioning. So what are the potential consequences here? And these are things I've seen in my practice. We see serotonin depletion, we see magnesium depletion, B vitamin, B12 insufficiency and malabsorption, irritability, brain fog, cognitive impairment, attentional disorders, depression, anxiety disorders, confusion and memory problems, alcoholism, nervous habits, mental disturbances, eating disorders, sleeping disturbances, emotional ability, and reactivity. Don't let this happen to you. Or someone you love. So many of you have heard, raise your hand if you haven't heard me do the metabolic wood stove analogy. Oh, okay, cool. So there's probably enough people here that haven't heard it. So I'll try to do this quickly because I don't have a lot of time. But basically, I basically see carbohydrates. I think we can look analogously at carbohydrates as being a form of metabolic kindling. And your whole grains, your beans, your brown rice, your sweet potatoes, and things like that, you can basically look at as being twigs on that metabolic fire. Now, white rice, safe starch, give me a break. Did I say that out loud? Whoops. White rice, bread, pasta, white potatoes, things like that, the other safe starch. Those are basically like crumpled up paper on your metabolic fire. Now, our old friend from college, alcohol, and things like sweetened beverages, etc. Those things, sports drinks, whatever, those are literally like throwing lighter fluid or gasoline on that metabolic fire. Now, if you have to heat your house, using nothing but a wood stove, and all you had was kindling to run that stove to heat your house with, you could do it. And guess what? 99% of our culture does it that way all the time. In fact, this is happening all over the world. But what are you actually doing? you are basically establishing a slave relationship with that wood stove. You're pulled up to the door of that wood stove and you're spending all day long grabbing handfuls of fuel to try to keep that fire going. You have a preoccupation with where the next handful of food is going to come from, right? The next handful full of fuel. Constantly looking, carrying those snacks around, you know, throwing more kindling on the fire all the time. And, you know, you're basically perpetually hungry. Now think who profits from that. On the other, and I can't think of a single multinational corporation, actually anywhere on planet Earth, that wouldn't be heavily invested in every man, woman, and child on this planet being entirely dependent on being primarily dependent on carbohydrates for their main fuel. Because it's cheap as hell to produce, it's extremely profitable, and it keeps you perpetually hungry. Monsanto's got to love that. I'm just saying. So on the other hand, you know, what's the alternative to this? Well, what if you're, you know, what if you take a nice big fat log and throw that on the fire? Now you're free, you can walk away. You can sleep all the way through the night without waking up at 3 a.m. feeling anxious. And yes, there, you know, is an analogy to be made here, thinking, fire's going out, got to do something. Oh my God, look in the wood stove. I got to start lighter fluid, paper, whatever. You throw the log on the fire, you go about your business, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Or not anymore, but you can do other things. And then you wake up in the morning, you look in the stove, and it's like, oh yeah, fire's burning down, I'll throw another log on, and you're free. I don't know anything that has ever been more freeing in my life than this. I mean, if I get up in the morning and I don't have time to eat and I dash out the door, whatever, you know, noon, 1 o'clock, I'm thinking, I know I'm kind of hungry, but my mood, cognitive, and energy equation is not dependent on sugar. It's dependent on fat as its primary source of fuel. And therefore, you know, there's no vacillation. I'm not living on a roller coaster. You know, how do you know if you have a blood sugar problem or not? I've got 2 questions for you. Number 1, if you haven't eaten for 6 or 7 hours, how you doing? You know, are you feeling fatigued? Are you feeling, you know, are you feeling confused, brain fogged? Are you feeling kind of irritable or cranky or agitated or a little something that rhymes with itchy, as I like to say? And then the second question is, how do you feel after you eat? Do you immediately feel better? Do you immediately feel like, oh, I've got a whole new lease on life. Yeah, baby, let's take it on. Or are you feeling like, you know, I'm going to kind of unzip my pants a little, sit on the couch and take a nap for a bit? If you answer yes to any of these, you've got a problem. This is not normal just simply because it is common. This is not the way we were designed to exist. How are you, you're like, well, how the hell am I supposed to feel if I haven't eaten for 7 hours? There's only one right answer, and that answer is hungry. How are you supposed to feel after you eat? The only answer, the only thing you're supposed to feel normally is not hungry. If it's anything else, you've got a problem.
This is very true. You just don't have those issues anymore. If you are fat adapted instead of carb adapted, you can go on for hours and there is no issue, no hunger crashes, not feeling faint all of a sudden, or actually not feeling faint after 2 hours after the last meal. There's nothing like that. You have energy, stable mood, and if you're a little bit hungry, you can still go on. And if you're really hungry, okay, then you eat, and after eating, you feel no longer hungry, but you don't feel tired. That's a huge difference. I remember how I used to feel after some vegan, plant-loaded, carb-loaded meal. I was so done. Completely exhausted. and my body needed time to digest. And I wasn't feeling energetic after a vegan meal. But once I started eating carnivore, once my body was really adapted, that was about 2 months or so. Wow, that difference. You feel energetic after you have eaten. You can just go on with your day. You are no longer hungry, and then you do whatever you do. It's amazing. It's really amazing. Such a difference. And I wouldn't want to go back to being carb dependent. That really sucks. You have so much more energy if you are fat adapted. I would say since I changed my way of eating, I'm a little bit better at verbally expressing myself. There's more cognitive capability, but then writing is still really easy in comparison to talking. It's just a flow, it comes out effortlessly. So it really has helped me in every way to change my way of eating, quitting veganism, and healing my body. The carnivore way of eating is very individual. I don't like chicken so much, but I very much like duck. And I have a slight histamine issue, it seems, so somehow my body doesn't like bone broth or anything that's cooked for too long. Frozen seems to be okay. And I had to add potassium, not calcium, but potassium. And for me, additional vitamin D was also substantial. It was really a big difference, the way I felt before and after. So this is individual. Everybody has to find out what works best. But it's really about healing your body. That's the most important thing and nothing else. And that's the case for many autistics.